A short while ago, many coaster enthusiasts, including myself, predictions were shattered when Six Flags Fiesta Texas announced their new for 2022 coaster. Most of you probably heard that Fiesta Texas was getting a new for 2022 coaster since the park started teasing it very early. But when it was announced, I was shocked. It wasn't the coaster that seemed the most likely. It wasn't the S&S Axis coaster. Fiesta Texas not getting an Axis for 2022 is a shocker, but it also brings back some old discussions to the table. That is why today I'm going to predict which park I can see building the first S&S Axis coaster now that Fiesta Texas is out of the picture. Let's not waste any time. What parks do I think are contenders for the Axis coaster? There are a few that seem to pop out as possible options. First, let's look at Cedar Fair. One park that jumps out at me right away is King's Dominion. Firstly, they seem to be getting a 4D free spin, which means they are already working with S&S. Secondly, they just lost Volcano, which was a unique launch coaster, and the Axis coaster has the option of a launch and would definitely be unique. It likely wouldn't be so expensive and would be a great replacement to Volcano, as well as a great marketing toy against Busch Gardens. The only problem with King's Dominion getting the first Axis is the fact that they seem to be getting a 4D free spin in 2022, which means their next coaster will likely be in 2024, 2025 or beyond. Honestly, I think it's the perfect coaster for that park, and it might help them get back on the right track, but a different park may get one first. That park is California's Great America. I know this is a weird one, but hear me out. King's Dominion got I-305, which, while being an awesome coaster, is very intense and likely never brought them a return on investment. If Cedar Fair decides to give King's Dominion another good coaster, they would probably want to test it out first. That's where California's Great America comes in. California's Great America is a smaller park, and their last coaster was in 2018. They are definitely due for a coaster, and maybe Cedar Fair will give them a smaller scale Axis coaster for 2022 or 2023 to test it out. Great America opened the first RMC Raptor in the chain with Railblazer in 2018, so it seems the chain doesn't have a problem trying out new models here. We can't discuss an S&S coaster model without bringing in Six Flags. Six Flags has a new CEO who is clearly doing different things than the last CEO. So we don't even know if this new CEO will love working with S&S as much as the other one. But assuming they continue working with S&S, which park could get an Axis? Before I discuss the individual Six Flags parks I think could get the first Axis coaster, it would mean a lot if you could subscribe. Lately this channel has been getting a ton of support, and I really appreciate it. But now, back to Six Flags. Now that Fiesta Texas is off the table, there are only a few other parks that could get a coaster as large as this. Great America is their other test park, but they just got Max Force in 2019, which is an S&S launch coaster. But maybe they'll get a Lift Hill version Axis coaster for 2023, though I don't think it's the best fit coaster for the park. Another park that I can see getting the Axis is Magic Mountain. They don't have a 4D free spin since it's too similar to Green Lantern and X2, but the Axis would be a different experience and a huge marketing toy. I can definitely see Magic Mountain getting an Axis coaster, but Six Flags usually tests new coaster models out in another park before putting them in Magic Mountain. So where could Six Flags test out the S&S Axis coaster if not in any of their test parks? I'm thinking Six Flags Over Georgia. Over Georgia isn't one of the chain's test parks, but they are no stranger to getting new coaster models. Over Georgia also is the biggest Six Flags park that never got a 4D free spin, so that makes the Axis coaster fit that much more. Their latest coaster was Twisted Cyclone in 2018, and they were one of the parks that opened their 2020 editions in 2020 if I'm correct, so I think they'll get a new coaster for 2022. Fun Spot down the road from them looks to be getting a massive ground-up RMC hybrid coaster, so over Georgia getting the Access coaster can also help with the competition down in Georgia and maybe even help them become a higher tier park. Now for the other parks in the US, no other park in the US really has a great relationship with S&S or would seem like they'd want an Access coaster really. Hershon doesn't work with them, and the same goes for SeaWorld for now. The only independent parks with a relationship with S&S are Kennywood and Adventureland, but I don't think they'd be contenders for the first Access coaster. One funny thing would be if SeaWorld San Antonio decided to go for the Access coaster and punch Fiesta Texas right in the face. But SeaWorld isn't in the greatest financial place right now, and as I said earlier, they don't work with S&S yet, so it probably won't happen, though it would be pretty funny if it did. Six Flags Fiesta Texas unveiled their latest coaster at the end of July. Today, I gave my thoughts on the effect this announcement had on the Access coaster. But you want to subscribe so you don't miss my future videos where I highlight some of the other effects that Diabolical is having. In conclusion, I think there are a few parks that are contenders for the first Access coaster. Some of the parks that may get the Access coaster aren't due for a coaster yet, so it may be another few years before we see an Access coaster. Honestly, I think Six Flags Over Georgia is the perfect place for an S&S Access coaster, and getting the first one for 2022 would make them a bigger destination park and would compete well with Fun Spot's RMC. King's Dominion can also do great things with it as a replacement to Volcano. Where do you think the S&S Access coaster will go? Let me know in the comments.